All right, so we're going to do the measuring air pollutant notes. So get your notes out. And there's our topic, measuring air pollutants. Okay, so we're going to ask a series of questions and then we're going to go through those answers to help go through. That's how I'm going to organize these notes this time. Okay, so first of all, where? Okay, we measure air pollutants all over the place. Our atmosphere is super thick, right? So air samples are collected in, and I'll make a little list here, monitoring stations around the world. So those are actual buildings that just take samples of air constantly, analyze them, put that data into a database. Mobile labs that move to locations for sampling. The University of Wyoming has one of these, and it's a van. So an example of a mobile lab would be a lab van. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Sometimes they bring that van to different schools and they show students the inside and all of the fancy chemical equipment. I mean, that van driving down the road is like millions of dollars because of all the lab equipment that's in there. Super technical instruments. All right, and then a final place that we get air samples and that we measure air pollutants is going to be in aircraft. Okay, so aircraft, so planes, for example, will collect air samples and bring them back to labs for analysis. Okay, so that's the where we measure air pollutants. Okay, how do we measure air pollutants? Okay, pollutants in the air can be measured in several ways. We'll make another bulleted list. We're just going to talk about two of these ways. There are others, but we're going to talk about two. Optical sensors. So I don't know if optical is a word that you're familiar with yet, but optical, like optometry, optometrist, okay? That has to do with the eye because it's light. So optical is light sensors, okay? So here's what we do with optical sensors. We shine light through a sample. Okay, so you have your sample of air in a little vial, you shine light through it. And you analyze the light that makes it through. Okay, now remember, our eyes aren't a very good tool when we're talking about measuring air pollutants because they're in such tiny, tiny quantities. So if you take a vial of air and you shine a light through it, to your eye, it seems like all of the light is coming through that vial, okay? But an instrument can shine a very specific wavelength of light at that vial and see if it's getting absorbed at all, or how much is getting absorbed, how much is making it through. There's certain wavelengths of light that every type of particle will absorb and not transmit, not let through. And when that is absorbed, it means that pollutant is there. So that's how we analyze this with optical sensors, okay? Chemical reactions is another way that we can analyze a sample of air, okay? We react air samples with other chemicals to determine what pollutants are present. All right. Units. Okay, we always have units when we make measurements. So if we're measuring air pollutants, what units are we going to be using? Okay, well, concentration of air pollutants can be measured in several units. It depends on how concentrated it is. Okay, the more concentrated it is, the bigger the unit we'll be using. Okay, so we might use parts per million, which we did a lab with earlier this week, and that'd be ppm. Okay, if it is a less concentrated toxin or pollutant, we would say parts per billion. And even smaller, parts per trillion, PPT. Okay, so mostly we're going to be working with parts per million, but we can measure, our scientific instruments can measure parts per billion, parts per trillion. Okay, limiting exposure. Okay, you can breathe cleaner air in your life by taking a few steps. Taking a few of the following steps. You can breathe cleaner air in your life by taking a few of the following steps. So we're pretty fortunate living here in Laramie. We have fairly clean air, okay? But there are still steps that we can take to make our air cleaner. And the chances that all of you are going to live in Laramie the rest of your lives are pretty slim, okay? So some of you will branch out and go somewhere else. And if you do, and you go to a city, then you're going to maybe think about these things to help limit your exposure to air pollutants so you can avoid some of those health effects that come, those negative health effects that come from bad exposure, okay? So limiting exposure, you can take these kinds of steps, okay? Use less busy streets. Whoa. Use less busy streets, okay? So whether you're driving, walking, riding your bike, if you take Grand Avenue, there's more traffic than if you take Spring Creek, okay? Or Reynolds. So when you use less busy streets, there is literally less pollutants. There are literally fewer pollutants in the air because there's less traffic producing those pollutants, okay? Plant trees around your house. Okay, so whenever you do get your own house, or if you have the ability to plant a tree around your current house, planting trees, or any plants really, but larger plants are better. They're natural air scrubbers, okay? They pull air in and they push out clean oxygen, and they absorb a lot of the pollutants that we put into the air, okay? Or that are put into the air. Stand back from the street, okay? A few feet makes a big difference, okay? A few feet makes a big difference. So if you're waiting to cross the street and you're standing right on the edge of the sidewalk, just a few feet back, mobile labs have determined that here versus here, okay, just a few feet back is going to make a big difference in your air quality when you are on a street, okay? Live in a cleaner area, so we already have that one, okay? Ventilate your home. And exercise early. So we watched that Right to Breathe film, and they talked about how exercising is supposed to be good for you, but when you exercise in Southern California during the day when the pollution is high, it actually can be detrimental to your health. It can make you less healthy because you're breathing in all those pollutants at a much higher rate than you would if you were just sitting there. But if you exercise early, before people are up and about and traveling and traffic gets high, when you exercise early, the air is cleaner, okay? So exercise when people are least active and you're gonna have the cleanest air. Anyway, that is the air pollutant, measuring air pollutants notes. So thank you for watching, and we will see you in class.